how do you, I mean, as a church,
Mhm.
how do we have some type of help
Yes.
that will fix that? Because
Yes.
you don't want to keep getting married, getting divorced, getting married, getting divorced.
Mhm.
How do you fix that so it doesn't continue?
Yeah. Well, it took 20 years for me to be fixed. And I loved Jesus and I was miserable and I went to get help. And once I experienced integration, the Lord gave me the instructions that I should share this. And I created a program called A Painted World that was shown on Hope Channel for 3 years, every three days a week for 3 years. And the union president gave me lots of money to make these DVDs that churches can purchase if they want to and share and go through to understand. And I get asked to go to workers' meetings and different places with leaders in the church to share this message with them. And more people are doing marriage and family studies, and they're using this material. So God is opening the doors wide for people to learn. So my being here this evening, because I didn't intend on staying, Sister Fletcher will tell you, I was going to preach in the morning and skedaddle, but she insisted that I stay and do a seminar in the afternoon. And I felt impressed by the Lord as I prayed. There are many seminars I could do, that this was the seminar I should do for tonight. Because there are people here who think that they're not saved, who think they're just not reaching up to the bar, who think that they're just not, because they're not experiencing the joy of salvation. And it's not because they're bad, it's because of the lack of understanding of how early childhood developmental issues are affecting their feelings and choices as adults. So I'm just doing this to bring awareness to you that this exists, and there are physicians here. I've heard them giving health nuggets, so maybe you didn't know that you could ask them, but I believe that almost every physician has to learn some of these things, right, doctor? So you have people right here who know and understand some of these things, so that you can build on this and do more work in this. I'm sharing with you 36 hours of material in 1 hour, one afternoon hour. So I'm just hitting things to spark awareness in your minds. But there are people right here with the qualifications and the ability to engage and educate people who may be struggling. I'm not sure if that helps, but that's what came to mind to answer. Yes. Okay. I'm just going to share one more aspect. I'm not sure what the time is, and you've been here all day, and we don't want to cause your public self to become violent. So, yes. Go ahead. Go ahead. The first family.
The first family, I don't need that.
Yes, you do. I didn't hear you at all.
I'm talking to her.
But I didn't hear you.
Okay, for the first family that you was talking about.
Yes.
Now, you said this person can bounce off to different, you know, fa- Yeah, different
Yeah,
roles.
play,
Thank you,
play
sir.
different roles. Yes.
And can you consider that bipolar?
No,
You
no,
can't?
no, no.
Since
Because
she's
there,
bouncing?
the bouncing. It's not bouncing.
Mhm.
It's that if for example I played the role of a caregiver in the family, but I see the need to be the hero, I can put that in the background for a while and be the hero. But it's not bouncing like bipolar. Bipolar is much more evident in severely dysfunctional than in that. So I wouldn't use the word bouncing. I was in the old days before the word bipolar, it was manic depressive, and I was diagnosed as manic depressive, and I am manic depressive. I am bipolar, but I've learned in Christ how to deal with it since I've been integrated. But because I was separated for so long, there were times when my emotions got out of control and I was either high and flying or down deep, cutting my wrist and ending up in the hospital because the extremes were so bad. It wasn't a role play, it was an emotional deprivation that was creating that. So no, you wouldn't call it bipolar. What happens is that a person who's in a severely dysfunctional family, they're not allowed to leave the family system. So, for example, a person in a I don't like to use severely, but a dysfunctional family, even if they're married for 50 years, Christmas and holidays, they say, I'm going home. Their home is never home because they're not allowed to leave home, the parental home. Yes. Whereas someone who is from the other dysfunctional family can leave home, and because their home is where they live, where they've made their home, and they go and visit their parents or families, but they're never going home. They're leaving home to go somewhere. That's the difference that it makes. Yeah. Okay? That's a quick answer. Okay. Any other questions? One more image that I'd like to share with you. There's the impact of the brain and how it develops. The material that I studied when I learned these family systems came from the Chicago Brain Institute, and back then they talked about the tripartite brain. But since then there's another institute in Chicago that describes not tripartite but actually 4 developmental stages of the brain. And they suggest that the beginning of the development of the brain is in the womb. And there's something that goes on and then it continues after birth and so forth. So what I'm sharing with you is the original that I learned. I've only read some things about the 4 parts. So this is what I learned. That the brain develops in 3 stages. And the first stage is the baby to maybe 1 year old, and this is the visceral. It's visceral because the brain is like a lizard's brain. Babies find food by their smell. They don't know that, for example, If you're not the mother of a baby and you hold the baby a certain way and it's hungry, it begins to nuzzle, because that's the visceral brain. And I've read studies where they looked at some gang members from Watts in LA that were imprisoned, and they found that their brain, these were men 20s and 30s, and their brains had not developed beyond this. And the conclusion of this study was that this is why they cannot feel remorse or sadness when they kill someone or hurt someone or something like that, because their brain has not developed beyond the visceral. The next stage that is the emotional stage. And the third stage is the mental, where you think, the thinking. There's a word for it, I can't think. Yeah, it's like the intellectual brain, the cognitive, yes. And these areas, they're called neurons. Let me see if I have those in my notes. There's a word, I don't know why I'm forgetting, neuronal gates. These areas are called neuronal gates. And they're supposed to, and we all have these 3 brain developmental stages as we get older. But what's supposed to happen is that in these spaces, these gates are supposed to open and close according to what we are involved in and what's going on. So for example, if you're in a parking lot and you're attacked, if these gates are working properly, you will know, you will have the feelings of fight or flight. And they figured out that there are people who, when they're attacked in places like that and the attacker says, get in the car, they know they're not to go in the car because they won't come back. But this doesn't function properly, so they get in the car and they end up being killed because the neuronal gates isn't functioning properly. And the neuronal gates between the emotions and the thinking brain also is supposed to help us so that when we get really angry with someone, we don't kill them. It's supposed to give us a balance. Yeah. But what happens is that in a dysfunctional child, there's the emotions are stuffed down, and they don't deal with their feelings and what's going on. They just keep stuffing it down, and what will happen is that one day they'll just have an explosion. It's like opening up a steam kettle and the steam comes out. You know, there was a guy in Seattle, Washington, this Filipino fellow who was a Seventh-day Adventist elder in his church, and he is a serial killer. And he murdered 14 girls before they caught him. Yeah. And he would murder them and go to church and do his eldering and everything like that. And this is the way he assumed that women were evil prostitutes. And what he did, they found out later on, he would go to them and tell them about Jesus, give them a tract, and invite them to Bible study, and then he would take them off and rape and murder them. And it's only by finding on one of the girls a piece of a Bible study tract that they were able to trace him. And this happened maybe about 10, 12 years ago because he's been in jail for quite some time. And what has happened, I believe, is that he had been spending his time stuffing down his emotions and his anger and all those sorts of things. And eventually it exploded. Remember, I read how Alice Miller says, these things are inside and they don't go away by wishful thinking or praying and fasting. They go away with the help of someone who understands how these things function. Here's the problem I see with us Adventists. We tend to deal from the thinking brain. Everything is thinking, and we undermine emotions, but we do have emotions. There are people who make us feel terrible, but we never say, you're making me feel terrible, because we have to smile and be good Christians. So what do we do with those feelings? We stuff them down, and eventually they're going to explode, and usually they explode on our children. They explode in an inappropriate way in the church, and we have not done a really good job of understanding how the brain develops. Okay? Yes. That's a good question, and I think the answer is a little bit more complex than my just saying yes. And let me just give the reason why I say that. In addition to the fact that the question is this the reason why so many of our young people are getting killed? Are killing each other. Is this the reason why our young people are killing each other? And my answer is, it's not a simple yes, although yes is part of it. The thing is that a lot of the young people who are killing, their visceral brain has not been nurtured into proper emotional growth, so they don't know how those neuronal gates are not functioning properly, so they don't know how to deal with anger. And especially if they were born in families where when their parents were pregnant and there was a problem in the family, their parents were screamed at. There's this guy named Rabbi Friedman. He's dead now, but he's written a book called Generation to Generation. And he showed in this book how there was a family, and the great aunt lived with the husband and wife, and she became pregnant. And when she had the baby suffered from aches and pains and cried all the time and in pain all the time. And no physician could find anything wrong with it. About, oh, my hands hurt, oh, my feet hurt, constantly complaining and whining. And the baby somehow absorbed that information and transmitted it into these feelings of pain and everything like that. I'm explaining that to say that many of these young people come out of families where bad things were done and said while they were in the womb. Or when they were born, bad things were done and said, and so they don't know how to handle properly these emotions, these strong emotions. Another reason, I read in an article by Ellen White. She was asked to say something about the criminal mind. And she wrote that many of the young people who commit crimes are expressing pain that they received in vitro, in the womb, that they have no way of articulating. They just know the feelings. And she gave this example. She said in her day, women who did not want children would use knitting needles to try to abort. And many times they didn't kill the fetus so that it could be expelled from their bodies. And the pain, she wrote, the pain that the fetus felt stayed within the child, and when they became young men and women, they acted out the pain in violence. That's the best example that I've found of understanding the criminal mind. And in our day and age, where people are just having babies and not really knowing how to care for babies because they're babies themselves, I think there's a lot of that happening. But there's much more complex things to it. I wouldn't just say yes to that. Yes.
I was in an abusive marriage and became pregnant. And I didn't want what you just described to happen to my baby. I prayed night and day for the Lord to let me have a healthy, happy baby. I read, I sang to her, and I tried my best to internalize positive feelings to the baby when the feelings or when my outside wasn't always positive. I prayed that it would not affect her, you know, and that she would be healthy and happy. And by God's grace, overall, she was. But I had to do that purposefully, continuously. I could not stop.
Yes.
Because I didn't want what you described for my baby to feel. I did not want what was happening around me to affect her.
Yes.
And I know that it was just the grace of God that I was able to do that. But I think that there are people that are within the church that are going to become pregnant or that are pregnant. The ones that have had their babies, it's too late. But
it's never too late.
Well, I mean, for the fetus inside, for the fetus inside them. But I would be willing to help anyone that is going through something.
Yeah.
Because I know how it is.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your willingness to be helpful, but I just want to throw out a word of caution that just because you went through something and you feel strongly about it does not really make you equipped to deal with someone else's issue. So just be careful how you offer that help and how you accept that help. My recommendation would be there are wonderful physicians and they know these things. Don't you, doctor, know some of these things? And there are specialists that you can refer people to. So I would really prefer not to have homegrown. I appreciate it. I'm not undermining that. But this is so delicate that it's best to leave someone in their sour juice rather than to help take them out and give them poison without even intending. I'm just saying, I think I have a responsibility to say that. Yeah, especially in these days, but thank you, and get the training. that will go with the experience that will make you a very strong advocate. Let me just share one last thing. It's not always men kicking women in the womb that causes trauma to children. If a mother was raped or molested as a child, you know you can pass that sexual rage onto your child. Undealt with sexual molestation and abuse can be passed on emotionally in rage to your child, and can create in that child activities and behavior that you wonder how, why, when, where, but it's because you did not deal, I did not deal, we did not deal with our own situations. My mother passed on to me her sexual